Matthew Perry, who famously portrayed Chandler Bing on Friends, was known for his quick wit and the close-knit bonds he shared with his on-screen pals. But in real life, the people around him weren't the friends maybe they could have been. Instead of protecting Perry, several individuals, including doctors, are accused of fueling his addiction and leading to his tragic overdose. Today, we'll speak with a local lawyer about the legal responsibilities and consequences at play. Ashton and Price is a prominent personal injury law firm right here in Sacramento County. We have Craig Ashton of Ashton and Price. Hello, Craig.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, so Craig, although you're not tied to this specific case, can you break down the federal criminal charges in the ketamine overdose with the late Matthew Perry?
Right. So essentially on October 28, 2023, so 10 months ago almost, he was found face down in his spa as a result of being injected with ketamine by his personal assistant. So the charges are conspiracy to distribute ketamine and distribution of ketamine. And the reason that's important, ketamine is a Schedule III drug, so you have to have a prescription to have access to it.
Okay, so why are these being looked at as only federal criminal charges and not state?
Yeah, really interesting because, it could have been a state charge because LA's got plenty of resources to prosecute this, but what the idea is that you have prosecutorial discretion. There was a risk that perhaps these influential people who are tied to actors and people that have lots of pull in Hollywood may basically get outside legal consequences as a result of what happened. You saw it in the Rodney King case where you remember it was a state trial and ultimately the officers were acquitted, riots occurred, and then they had federal charges and then they were found guilty. So ultimately in this case it's a federal charge instead of a state charge, so it's a U.S. District Attorney's Office rather than the local district attorney.
And then let's talk about the doctor-patient relationship and how that could play out in a legal defense.
Yeah, so this is really interesting in that you are, under a doctor's supervision, able to have ketamine. So what happened in this case is that the individuals got greedy. That one of the doctors said, how much is this moron going to pay? And charged $55,000 for ketamine, charged him $2,000 a vial for the cost was 12 bucks. And so the issue was that you can prescribe medication off-label like this, but because there were writings that indicated that these people were motivated by money, taking advantage of his addiction, and then ultimately leading to his death, they were charged as a result outside of the doctor-patient relationship because of the greed factor for basically the conspiracy to prescribe ketamine and provide ketamine causing death. And that's basically a, lots of jail time as a result.
Yeah, and it's an unfortunate case with how things panned out with the life loss. What were the medical examiner's findings?
So yeah, the medical examiner's findings are very clear. Acute toxicity from ketamine. So it wasn't the drowning, or he slipped and fell, hit his head. It was basically ketamine was dissociative, ultimately led to him losing consciousness and then he drowned. And so at that point, the prescription of the drug that was not supervised properly, basically because of avarice and greed to make this money, how much will this moron pay? And at that point, they're getting charged with involuntary manslaughter, much like Alec Baldwin was in the shooting case with a gun. In this case, the gun was the ketamine.
And what exactly is drug scheduling and where did it come from?
That's Controlled Substances Act. So that's 1970, Richard Nixon. Bit of a panic where they made marijuana Schedule I, the worst drug ever. And so we pretty much ignore that in 2/3 of the country. So in this case, we have Schedule I, marijuana, heroin, LSD, Schedule II, Adderall, Schedule III, ketamine, and basically steroids, and then Schedule IV is like Xanax. And so what it basically means is that there is a risk for addiction versus some sort of medical efficacy, and they try to balance that. And marijuana is the most dangerous one under the federal rules, which is kind of ridiculous. And then Schedule III is ketamine.
Okay, and then what about the federal charges against the 5 defendants? Because that's kind of been the new news that we've been receiving.
Right, so 3 of them saw the writing on the wall, said, look, we called and said, how much is moron going to pay? They're making tons of money, not motivated by doctor-patient privilege or helping somebody who's a drug addict, but taking advantage of them financially. 3 of them pled guilty to conspiracy to distribute ketamine. There's 2 of them that are fighting it, Jasmine Songa, who's known as the ketamine queen in LA, and then Dr. Salvador Plasencia, who was essentially saying, look, this is doctor-patient privilege, don't cross that. What I do with my patients is basically my purview, and once you pierce that, it's a slippery slope, and then no doctor's actions will ever be private. So that's the defense, and it may be a good one, and this could get all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, because ultimately, when you start to pierce the doctor-patient relationship, which is based upon a privileged interaction, and you make that a criminal interaction, then it could basically put a wet towel on all doctor-patient interaction in this country, and that's an area that maybe the Supreme Court might want to look at some point.
Yeah, Craig Ashton always keeping us up to date on the current legal cases. Craig, always appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, to our viewers, legal resources are right here in our area. You can go to ashtonandprice.com.